I spent 23 years at USP Marion, the home of many a mobster. At one time, the only place to find more wise guys was the graveyard at St. John's Cemetery right here in New York City. Most people have heard of Fat Tony, the real-life godfather, Anthony Salerno, who ran the Genovese crime family, and the Gambino crime family boss, John Gotti. But the men who made those organizations work were the soldiers. They grew up in places like the Bronx or, part of Pleasant Avenue, which runs from 114th Street to 120th Street, just east of First Avenue in East Harlem. Italians have been there for more than 100 years. A place where cops sometimes went on the take and everybody had a nickname. One of these lesser-known soldiers was Ernie Boy, also known as Oreste Abbamonte. I met him when he was doing life in prison at USP Marion for a host of, mob criminal activity. He ran a drug operation and had the cops and other public officials on the payroll. Abbamonte spent his entire adult life outside of prison in narcotics distribution. His first conviction was in 1969 on drug charges, followed by a 1973 conviction for his plans to murder the witness against him. Abbamonte was convicted again in '93 on heroin distribution conspiracy in New York and was given 25 years by the feds in addition to his parole violation. Abbamonte threatened to kill the federal agents that arrested him. In 1996, while locked up at USP Lewisburg, he was caught along with a co-defendant using the prison telephones to facilitate his drug trafficking. For this stunt, old Ernie Boy caught a RICO charge and was given life without parole. The court wanted his criminal activities behind bars stopped. He was sent to Marion, where we could keep a close eye on his visitors and the use of his phone. Because of him, the BOP set up an entirely new phone schedule that was far more restrictive. Ernie Boy spent most of his time where I was assigned in B Unit, when I first got there to Marion. While he was there, he was just the model inmate. He'd given up all his games and he was just going to do his time. That was what he wanted us to think. I had my doubts. I know he didn't operate as he usually did at Marion. In Baker Unit, when I was there with Ernie Boy, we had, a lot of old-time officers. One guy used to bring in a lunchbox full of cigarettes, never any food, just cigarettes. Made sure he knew what was going on in that unit. He checked each lock twice. He'd call the towers and ask them what the inmate just said, and whoever, who was he talking to when he used the phone. The guy would cut his thumb to ensure that the blade was still in that little plastic razor that we gave to the inmates when we got them back. He inspected every security screen on every shift he ever worked down there. He made me pull the doors on every cell when we locked down for the night, and then he'd go back and double check everything, make sure I didn't miss anything. He was on his feet, walking the ranges, searching inmates and the cells all the time. He insisted I watch everything he did, and he made sure that attitude of vigilance was drilled into me. This was the Marion difference. New people worked closely with the older, experienced staff. I never worked alone. My actions were accountable 100% of the time to somebody. Observe, inspect, search, report was the constant activity. When I walked the range, my number one asked me a couple of questions when I got back. And if I missed anything like scratches on the floor, paint chips missing, he sent me back and told me to be more observant next time. New scratches on the floor meant somebody was making a shank to kill me. Missing paint was an escape by cutting the bars or some other security device. We even had to account for the hair that the barber cut. It could be used to make a decoy head. Nothing could be assumed to be as it appeared. It took years to train an officer to be observant enough. We reported our observations both in writing and informally to each other at the end of the shift. I can tell you now how much my fellow officers helped me by letting me know what happened at the end of their shift. This method is no longer practiced at USP Marion. Today, new people are just thrown to the wolves with little, contact with their fellow staff. It's the inmates that train the COs about as much as the older staff, maybe even more. Today, an officer's on his own. He has only his own resources to get through a shift. He is more concerned with cleaning and security. Askus and the supervisor's paramount to promotion. Taking care of your coworker takes a back seat. It's every officer for themselves these days. I'm glad I'm gone, and believe me, I'm not missed. Having said that, I blame all this on the leadership of the BOP. After all, new officers they hire for the most part have bachelor's degrees, some even have postgraduate degree. I met a female officer with a master's degree who was working on her PhD. And they don't lack ambition either. One young lady told me that before I left, she was going to climb the ladder to warden in less time than it took me to get to senior officer specialist. She didn't make it, but she really tried. The introduction to USP Marion of women was supposed to help with our lack of diversity, as well as calm the inmates. Studies that, these eggheads do at universities with Ivy League names have proven that women have a calming effect in men's prisons. So with this highly educated, ambitious, new generation, it's obvious that the leadership must be the problem. Perhaps, when these new people take over in 5 or 10 years, all that'll change. Now back to my story. Near the end of '89, old Ernie Boy finished at, USP Marion program, and he earned a transfer to Leavenworth. That's a maximum security prison, by the way, but it's a lot less restricted than Marion. At Leavenworth, Abbamonte went back to his old tricks. He and, some other inmates and a co-conspirator on the outside bought 10 kilograms of pure cocaine. He conducted his business just like he had before with the visitors and the prison telephones. And in '92, Abbamonte pled guilty to 3 counts of interstate travel and aid of racketeering, which related to his participation in the cocaine traveling. He is sentenced to 15 years for this conviction, which was added to his life sentence, so it didn't even add a single minute to his time in prison. One wonders why the government even bothered. They could have, but they didn't. Write the guy an incident report and send him to the hole for it. At least he would have had some sort of punishment. They sent him to USP Terre Haute, which is in Indiana, from Leavenworth, but failed to tell anybody that the guy uses his visitors and the prison phones to run a criminal drug organization on the outside. The BOP is so obsessed with secrecy, they don't even share information from one prison to another. The government is so worried about protecting prisoners' rights to privacy that they won't give me information I need to protect the public on the outside. Is it any wonder the BOP is driven crazy by me telling you what goes on behind the wire? Now, to be fair, the BOP does have a hot file, but it only tells the warden and the Special Investigative Supervisor, or the SIS as we call him, that old Ernie Boy is a member of the Gambino crime family. That information never filters down to us people who can use it to, detect and report further criminal activity on his own. Even knowing all this about Abbamonte's phone and visiting privileges are not restricted or given any special monitoring. To be closer to home, he was sent to USP Allenwood. The fact is, not only has none of his privileges been restricted, but he was given unlimited phone calls at USP Allenwood. He was never given an incident report for any of this criminal activity, and it was only detected by outside law enforcement because his outside contact got caught. The only time he stopped his criminal activity was when he was at USP Marion, guarded by people like us. Now, this is just one of the many stories of the BOP failing to stop inmates from continuing their criminal activity from behind the bars. Ernie Boy's a true soldier of the Mafia. Nothing will ever prevent him from doing all he can to continue, being a wise guy. His loyalty is first, last, and always to the family. There's nothing short of death that's ever going to change that. It was a grave mistake to change the mission at USP Marion. The men of my generation had the training, the expertise, and the experience to protect the public and the prison population from people like Abbamonte. That group of men has now retired or died. Like the people who worked at Alcatraz, the skill to effectively manage this type of convict is gone and will never come back. We at USP Marion had to pay the mistake of closing Alcatraz with the 3 lives of Marion correctional officers. The Bureau is now reaping the reward for changing Marion now. The only defense the Bureau has is secrecy. Nobody knows about it, then it didn't happen. The government has done all it can to stop me from telling you these stories. In just this video alone, they refuse to share any information about disciplinary reports, even a photo of the guy. The parole board will send me pages with the name of the parolee at the top, and all the other information is blank. They even send public documents available to anybody to the legal office to be approved and redacted. The BOP feels they need to screen for classified information in the public documents. It's no mystery why the public has no idea what goes on behind the fence. When I started this project, I had no idea the amount of resistance and pushback I'd encounter. Twice, the BOP has contacted me through internal affairs. I've had a request for documentation of these so-called investigations, but I've been told, it's going to take more than a year to get these documents and, to get the legal approval to release them and finally put them in the mail. If any of you believe the U.S. government is transparent, you haven't tried to find out about anything from them, no matter how minuscule or trivial it is. Now, if you like this video, hit the like button down there, will you? Don't be an ass. And would it kill you to subscribe?